This is the Democratic Socialist Libertarian, DemSoLib. Spanish authorities have handed out jail sentences ranging from 9 to 13 years to Spanish politicians who were involved in the Catalonian Independence Referendum. Backstory: in 2017, the Catalonian Parliament, which is, I should say Catalonia is a region of Spain, the Catalonian Parliament voted for independence. They wanted to break away from Spain and have their own sovereign nation state. The Spanish Constitutional Court, which would be the equivalent of our Supreme Court, said this was illegal. The Catalonian residents took to the streets, and those demonstrations were ruthlessly crushed by Spanish security forces. To give you some context, it would be the equivalent of California saying they wanted to secede from the United States and form their own independent nation state. So the question is, was Catalonia's attempt at independence justified? From my viewpoint, absolutely yes. Why do I say that? Spain is part of what's known as the PIGS, P-I-I-G-S, of Europe. This is Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, Spain. And these nation states are being crushed by the EU bankers and technocrats in Brussels. To understand this a little better, you have to understand how these countries were brought into the EU. Let's use Greece as an example. Greece has a totally different economy than, say, Germany or France, and it is not necessarily harmonious. But what the EU technocrats did was they hired Goldman Sachs, and Goldman Sachs did an audit of the economy of Greece and the rest of the EU states, the EU body, and they said, yes, we've looked at all the books, all the financials, and Greece and the EU will integrate well together. Now, Goldman Sachs was paid a lot of money for doing that, and other banking cartels. Goldman Sachs did the Greece one. And this was a lie. We actually found out later that Goldman Sachs fudged the books. They fucked with the numbers. It was a totally contrived conclusion. Actually, the economy of Greece and the economy of the EU is not compatible. And what Greece sacrificed was their own sovereign currency. So now Greece could no longer increase the value or devalue the currency to protect their own domestic economy. They had to use the euro. And the euro was not compatible with the Greek economy. And what wound up happening is Greece went into huge debt, just like Italy, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, to the EU central bank. And what happens is, just like when you go into debt to the mafia or a loan shark, they start taking all your assets, they threaten you. So now they take away your paycheck. Well, what they did the same thing. They took away their pensions, their health care, everything that Greece had to pay back these EU bankers, because that's the way they operate. They get countries in debt, and then they take their airports, their national utilities, their electric companies, and they get them for pennies on the dollar because this is what the collateral is. And so they repossess all your sovereign wealth and of your nation. And that's what's been happening. And so the standard of living of people in Spain, Ireland, Italy, Greece, goes down. And so it gets even worse, because not only do you lost your sovereign currency, but now you're under their neoliberal system. And the way this works is they want to funnel all the wealth from the working and middle class to the 1%. So they cut benefits, they decrease the quality of life, they destroy the healthcare system, Social Security, they raise the age of retirement, they just make it a really hard scrabble life. In Greece, pensioners were committing suicide because they didn't have enough money to live once they cut their pensions. And there's the same thing with Spain. You have these high unemployment rates and more austerity, more and more and more neoliberal austerity. And so Catalonia rightly said, hey, wait a minute, we want to produce our own currency, we want control over our own laws, we do not want these EU technocrats and bankers gaming the system, making our laws, controlling our currency to turn us into debt slaves. And so that the Catalonian Independence Referendum was the natural response to that. Now, and this was kind of in the spirit of Brexit. That's what the whole Brexit thing was about. They wanted to get freedom from this EU technocrat banker system. Unfortunately, Brexit was hijacked and sabotaged by the British politicians. Now, I gave the example earlier of California seceding from the United States. And to be fair, if I'm going to support Catalonian independence, would I support a situation where California seceded from the US? First off, from my viewpoint, the United States Republic no longer exists. It was overthrown after the 9/11 coup d'etat. What we have now is a corporatocracy completely run by oligarchs, multinational corporations, bank cartels, military industrial complex, etc. There is no longer any input from the citizenry. This is a de facto dictatorship. So yes, I would 100% support California seceding from the US corporatocracy under the following conditions. If they had universal health care, if they had their own sovereign currency that was not linked to the fiat currency of the Rothschild, Rockefeller, Federal Reserve debt usury system. Would they implement a green energy New Deal that would save the California environment, its water, its air, its soil, and give millions of high-paying jobs to California residents? Would they stop the private prison program, this private prison industrial complex that destroys lives, and use those resources to create jobs and education programs? If they followed along that trajectory, I would absolutely 100% be for Californian independence, and that goes for Texas and any other state that followed along those lines. Now, how would the U.S. handle this? They would send in the military, security forces, and they would ruthlessly crush any independence movement, as was done in Catalonia. This all gets to the concept of decentralized power. In Europe, since we're talking about Catalonia, you have 513 million people in the EU. How could you have democracy if you have a very tiny centralized power group in Brussels of technocrats and bankers and oligarchs making decisions about the lives of people in Slovakia, Greece, the Czech Republic, Spain, France, etc. Wouldn't it be much better to have local people making local decisions about how their lives work? That would be democracy. Then you would have small, decentralized, local government with community involvement. You can't have that when you just have one cabal of, power elites running the show for hundreds of millions of people. The same thing applies to the United States of America. You have a small group of elites in Washington, D.C., New York City, San Francisco, L.A., controlling the rest of the country. They don't give a flying fuck about how people live in Arkansas, Texas, or even how the average person lives in New York, DC, or San Francisco. Only that how that central power elite live. They are not equipped to govern and handle the problems the average person faces. And not only are they not equipped, they don't care. Their only concern is their own wealth and their elite group. So I am for decentralized power. The optimal situation would be like the 13 colonies, of course, without the slavery and the Native American genocide, but have small centralized states that are bound by a common constitution, work in harmony and alignment, but that manage their own affairs. This is the Democratic Socialist Libertarian. Check out my e-newsletter at demsolib.com, where you will get intel. I've sent out an August newsletter. I've sent out a September newsletter. I'm going to send out an October newsletter. So definitely get linked up to that. Thanks for listening.